Hello, welcome to STEM School. Today, we are going to talk about Scrum. In this lesson, we are going to go through all the theoretical knowledge about Scrum. So what is Scrum? It's a project management methodology, of course. So Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, team, and organization generate value through adaptive solution for complex problems. So it is a framework instead of step-by-step guide to teach you how to go through this project management methodology. Okay. So Scrum requires a Scrum Master to foster an environment where a product owner orders the work for a complex problem into a product backlog. The Scrum team turns the selection of the work into an increment of value during a sprint. The Scrum team and its stakeholders inspect the result and adjust for the next sprint and repeat. So that's the Scrum. So there are lots of new terminologies that we are going to talk about later. Okay, so here's the graph shows what the Scrum is really about. So we do have something called product backlog. So it's a list. Then the picked product backlog goes into a sprint backlog, okay? And the sprint backlog will be worked by the Scrum team during the sprint. So the sprint could be max of 30 days and usually 2 weeks. Okay, so after the sprint, there are working increments of the software is produced. And then the next sprint, the next sprint, the next sprint. Okay, so that is a simplified diagram of Scrum. So Scrum is founded on empiricism and lean thinking. So empiricism asserts that knowledge comes from experience and making decisions based on what is observed. Lean thinking reduces waste and focuses on the essentials. Okay, and Scrum employs an iterative, incremental approach to optimize predictability and to control risks. Scrum engages groups of people who collectively have all the skills and expertise to do the work and share or acquire such skills as needed. So there are 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Let's take a look at the Scrum pillars. So first, transparency. So the emergent process and the work must be visible to those performing the work as well as those receiving the work. So there's the transparency between the Scrum team and the stakeholders. Everything is visible and transparent. So when there's an issue, that the Scrum team will share with the business stakeholders. So a joint decision will be made to solve the issues if that requires business stakeholders to help with the input or the decisions. Okay, so and there are other scenarios that could describe the transparency, but in a simple word, that all the information are shared between the Scrum team and the business partners. Okay, so the second is inspection. So the Scrum artifacts, we're going to talk about this later, and the progress towards agreed goals must be inspected frequently and diligently to detect potential undesirable variances or problems. Okay, so we inspect our outputs, our process all the time so that we can adjust. And the third one, adaptation. So if any aspects of a process deviate outside the acceptable limits, or if the resulting product is unacceptable, it must be adjusted as soon as possible to minimize further deviation. Okay, so there is the adaptation behind the inspection. Okay, so adaptation becomes more difficult when the people involved are not empowered or self-managing. So adaptation is based on self-managing of the Scrum team. Okay, so those are the 3 pillars of Scrum and the Scrum values. So commitment, respect, focus, openness, and courage. So again, commitment. So when the Scrum team members are committed for the tasks they do within the sprint, they are committed to finish those tasks. So that's one of the commitment. Respect is respect with each other. Openness, again, it's relevant to transparency and openness to talk about all the problems and issues and solve together. Okay, so there's the visibility to not just among the Scrum team, also with business partners. Focus, we don't have to talk about it. And courage is courage to speak out whatever issues and to speak out during the Scrum events. Okay, so Scrum team. Scrum team consists of 1 Scrum Master, 1 Product Owner, and developers. Okay, so that's the Scrum team. Within the Scrum team, there are no sub-teams or hierarchies. Alright, so Scrum Master, Product Owner, and developers, they are just playing different roles in the Scrum team. So no one is reporting to anyone here. Okay, so they are also self-managing, meaning they internally decide who does what, when, and how. So what does that mean? So developers are going to pick what tasks they want to do during a sprint. Okay, so they self-commit that they are going to finish certain tasks they picked for that sprint. A Scrum team has typically 10 or fewer people. Okay, the Scrum team is responsible for all product-related activities, from stakeholders collaboration, verification, maintenance, operation, experimentation, research and development, and anything else that might be required. So it's the Scrum team is responsible end to end of the product. Okay, from the product development and until the product operation. Okay, so let's take a look of the developers. So they are committed to create any aspect of a usable increment each sprint. Okay, so creating a plan for sprint, the sprint backlog, instilling quality by adhering to a definition of done. We're going to talk about it at the end. Adapting their plan each day towards the sprint goal, and holding each other accountable as professionals. So that's the developers that they are committed to do. Okay. And product owner. The product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. Okay, so a product owner is also accountable for effective product backlog management. So developing and explicitly communicating the product goal, creating a clearly communicating product backlog items, ordering product backlog items, ensuring the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood. So you can see that lots of work of the product owner is focused on the product backlog. Of course, the people communicate with business stakeholders more often than the developers, and try to effectively manage the product backlog with business stakeholders. So for a product owner to succeed, the entire organization must respect their decisions. Okay, so it is very important here to implement a Scrum methodology within your organization. Scrum team, Scrum Master. So the Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. Okay, so Scrum Master is accountable for the Scrum team's effectiveness. The Scrum Master serves Scrum team in several ways. Okay, so coaching, that's the most important job of Scrum Master. So coaching the team members in self-management and cross-functionality. Okay, help the Scrum team focus on creating high-value increments that meet the definition of done. Okay, so about the creating high-value increments, Scrum Master just helping the Scrum team to do that. All right, so the ultimate responsibility for doing that is developers. Okay, so that's just helping and causing the removals of impediments to the Scrum team's progress. All right, so when there's impediments during the sprint, Scrum Master should help to remove the impediments to the Scrum team. All right, so ensuring that all Scrum events take place and are positive, productive, and kept within the time box. Okay, so we are going to talk about Scrum events later. So they are the meetings, different Scrum meetings. Okay. And Scrum Master serves the product owner in several ways. Okay, so now it's about serving the product owner. So help find technique for effective product goal definition and product backlog management. Okay, so find techniques for the product owner, but still the product owner is responsible for managing product backlog. Help Scrum team understand the need for clear and concise product backlog items. Again, this is also helping, not responsible for that. So helping establish empirical product planning for a complex environment, and then facilitating stakeholders' collaboration as requested or needed. So again, mostly helps the product owner and Scrum team to fulfill their tasks. The Scrum Master serves the organization in several ways. Okay, so that's about the organization. So leading, training, and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption. Okay, so usually it requires Scrum Master to coach in the organization, because not for a successful implementation of the Scrum within the organization need to adapt according to the Scrum methodology, so that the implementation of Scrum can be successful. All right, so it's not just that we are going to have a team that running with Scrum and all the other part of the organization will still function as waterfall. It won't work. so the Scrum will fail. Okay, so planning and advising Scrum implementations within the organization. Helping employees and stakeholders understand and intact an empirical approach for complex work. Okay, and remove barriers between stakeholders and Scrum teams. So Scrum Master not just play a coaching role for the Scrum team, but also a coaching role to the rest of the organization. So now we are talking about Scrum events now. So first, the sprint. Sprints are the heartbeat of Scrum. So where ideas are turned into values, right? So in other words, we can easily say the sprint is a development cycle. Okay, so it could be 4 weeks or 3 weeks, or usually the most frequent sprint or the most common sprint I've experienced is 2 weeks. Okay, so no change are made that will endanger sprint goal. Quality does not decrease. The product backlog is refined as needed. Scope may be clarified and renegotiated with product owner as more is learned. Okay, so basically, sprint is the development cycle where there's the beginning and there's the end. All right, so at the end of the sprint, the Scrum team delivers the increments. Okay, and at the beginning of the sprint, there is sprint planning. All right, that we're going to talk about later. So it defines what the Scrum team will develop during the sprint, which could be a 2-week time frame. Okay. So sprint planning. So topic 1, why is this sprint valuable? The whole Scrum team then collaborates to define a sprint goal. Okay, so topic 2, what can be done this sprint? Developers select items from the product backlog to include in the current sprint. Right, so if you remember the graph I showed, so first we got a list of product backlogs. Okay, that's the list, and then we pick certain items and put it into a sprint. Okay, put it into a sprint. So topic 3, how will the chosen work get done? All right. So for each selected product backlog items, the developers plan the work necessary to create an increment that meets the definition of done. This is often done by decomposing product backlog items into smaller work items of 1 day or less. So that's very important. So first we got the product backlog, right? So we got the lists and we pick the lists to the sprint. And then what do we need to do with the list? We need to We need to make tasks from the list if the product backlog item itself takes more than 1 day. Okay, so some of the items could be take like 3 days. Okay, so in this case, you need to separate that task at least into 3 subtasks. Okay, so that it can be tracked within the sprint. And the next one, daily Scrum. So the purpose of daily Scrum is to inspect progress towards the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog as necessary, just adjust the upcoming planning work. So usually it's a 15-minute, okay, for the developers of the Scrum team. All right, so 15 minutes every morning. So usually 3 topics: what we've done, what we are planning to do, any blocking issues. Okay, so if there's blocking issues, the Scrum Master is there to help to remove those blocking issues. Okay. and sprint review. So inspect the outcome. So we here got the inspect. So inspect outcome of the sprint and determine the future adaptations, right? So if you remember the 3 pillars, one of them is inspection, and there's the adaptation, right? So the Scrum team represents the result of their work to key stakeholders, and progress towards the product goal is discussed. So it's basically review what we have done for that sprint. So it's a working session, all right? And the sprint retrospective. So plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. The Scrum team discussed what went well during the sprint, what problem is encountered, and how those problems were or were not solved. Okay, so retrospective, it's a, let's say, easily say it's a lesson learned session that we need to keep what we are doing well during the sprint, okay? And we need to fix the problems that we met during the sprint so that we can improve for the next sprint. All right, so that's the sprint retrospective does. So now let's talk about Scrum artifacts. So the first one, product backlog. So product backlog is an emergent ordered list of what is needed to improve the product. It is a single source of work undertaken by Scrum team. So product backlog items that can be done by the Scrum team within one sprint are deemed ready for selection in a sprint planning event. This is an ongoing activity to add details such as description, order, and size. The developer who will be doing the work are responsible for sizing. So there are a lot of information there. So first, product backlog. It could be a user stories. So something like, as a end user, I would like to be able to open this form and edit this form so that I can save my inputs into the system, for example. So this is a user story, which can be a product backlog item. So in order that this product backlog item can be picked by the Scrum team and put into a sprint, is that we probably need to have this product backlog item go through with the Scrum team and to find out, for example, whether we have enough information to do the development of this product backlog item. Okay, so for example, from the very beginning, I can see that the acceptance criteria is missing there. So once we got acceptance criteria, then the Scrum team need to evaluate the effort. Okay, so how many working effort do we need to have this product backlog item done? Okay, then after the value of effort is evaluated, then the product backlog item is in detail that every team member know how to do that, then it could be selected and added to the sprint. Okay, so sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog is composed of sprint goal, Y, the set of product backlog items selected for sprint, what, as well as an actionable plan for delivering the increment, how. Okay, the sprint backlog is a plan by and for the developers. All right, so the developers create the sprint backlog and they are committed for that, for those sprint backlog items they picked. Okay, so it is highly visible real-time picture of the work that developers plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal. So the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint. As more is learned, it could have enough detail that they can inspect their progress in the daily Scrum. Okay, so usually there are different status for each item or tasks, so that if the developers is so at the beginning, usually the developer is committed for their tasks, right? So they commit their task, and then once they start working on particular task during that day, the status of that task is changed to in progress. And when they are done with the task, so the status of the task is changed to done. There could be other status that is quite different across different organizations. Increment. An increment is a concrete stepping stone toward the product backlog. Each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly verified, ensuring that all increments work together. In order to provide value, the increment must be usable. So multiple increments may be created within a sprint. The sum of the increment is presented at the sprint review, thus supporting empiricism. Work cannot be considered part of an increment unless it meets the definition of done. So we're going to talk about definition of done, okay? So the increments are created from the picked product backlog items, which in other words, we can say the increments are tasks that created from product backlog items. Okay, so the tasks, again, as I mentioned before, could be different status. So when it's done, which it meets the definition of done, it will be marked as done. Okay, so we need to talk about the definition of done. All right, so definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures requires for the product. Okay, the moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. Okay, so the definition of done creates transparency by providing everyone a shared understanding of what work has completed as part of the increment. If a product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review. Instead, it returns to the product backlog for future consideration. Okay, so at the very beginning of implementing the Scrum, the definition of done should be properly defined, and should be presented not just inside the Scrum team, but also to the business partners, so that everybody has a common understanding of what is definition of done, so that during the implementation of the Scrum or during the project time frame, that the product backlog items, when it changed to increment, when it's done, everybody should have a common understanding. So that is everything for the Scrum in this session. There will be other sessions that I'm going to talk about more. Thank you. That's everything for today's lesson. Please click like if you like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.